All right. Today I am interviewing my buddy, long-term friend Nate Gibbs.
Hey,
He's
how's it going?
good, dude. So tell us where are you at right now?
So right now I'm in Berrien Springs and I've been here for a bit. I just finished the master's in divinity. Um, my wife just finished the master's in youth and young adult ministry and master's in social work.
Mhm.
And then we were talking and she's like, I was like, should I go back and pastor, come back through to the PhD? And she's like, no, I'll go find a social work job and you go into the PhD. So that's what I did. And I'm about a year into the program.
Year into okay. So what is your focus for your PhD? What is the field that you're studying?
So I am studying systematic theology is the main emphasis, with a cognate, which is kind of like your minor,
Hmm.
in church history.
So what is for people on the street that aren't super familiar with what is systematic theology?
So systematic theology is actually really kind of cool because you can kind of do anything.
Hmm.
You have, well, like within it, there's like biblical theology, which is kind of like the formation of doctrine or looking at the patterns in the text. So
Hmm.
that there's that part of it. And then there's just the idea of analyzing doctrine and comparing thinkers that have formulated their doctrine with others. So you're like compare the thought of some thinker with another thinker. It can be within Adventism, outside of Adventism. You're just looking at other systems and comparing them.
Hmm.
You have historical theology, which is kind of showing the development of doctrine or what people believed about a doctrine over time or several doctrines over time. Historical theology. Systematic proper is the looking for patterns and systems and talking about doctrine. Then you got philosophical theology, which kind of talks about like your presuppositions, dealing with worldviews, engaging philosophy and theology together. And then you got ethics, which is kind of like the practical part of systematic theology, like what do you do? How do you behave? What should you think about this? These kinds of things. So there's kind of like, it's just a big field. So I'm kind of getting into the philosophical theology, um, because I'm very interested in engaging culture, engaging our presuppositions, those are our kind of the things we bring when we study the Bible that get in the way. Um,
Right.
like, I don't know, what could we call that? Let break that down. That's easier.
Pre-understandings, cultural baggage, perhaps,
Yeah,
or
you could because people say all culture is bad, but we all have it. We're kind of swimming in it. So it's just the stuff you bring. It's your biases.
mm-hmm.
The thing you're what like, it's like your glasses are shaded a certain color and you see everything that color. uh it kind of affects what you do. Like, I remember there's a guy um who was invited to California conference, um the big meeting, the camp meeting, and he had issues with the law and with rules. And then you listen to his story, and he had issues with his dad being really strict. So he was trying to escape this strict father figure. And so he kind of wanted a more, I don't know, hippie Jesus, kind of a loosey goosey one, because where I had a different experience. My dad was a hippie, not a lot of rules. And so I wanted structure. So I had a tendency to travel down the structure and rules and wanting this. So I was a little more rigid. And so it was eye-opening thing that I wanted a different kind of father in my heavenly father. So
Mm.
I was only looking at certain texts and ignoring his texts. And so when I dialogue, I realized I can't ignore his text. He was ignoring mine, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do the same thing. So dealing with that is very interesting. So that's some of the stuff with the philosophical theology. And
So,
also just looking, I mean, philosophy crept in to
right.
the church way early. And how can we unravel that? Is it even possible?
Mm-hmm.
Should we? These are lots of questions that we need to look at and
Wow.
find
So
it fascinating.
that's a lot for anyone on the street to chew on, everything that you just said. One thing I'd like to react to that I think is interesting, and this is something that I've thought about a long time, is that our psychology influences our theology? Kind of like what you were saying, in the sense of like your own upbringing, what you needed uh, God to be is what you searched for him to be.
Well, the Bible says the fool has said in his heart, there
Mm.
is no God. And the heart isn't the emotional center alone. Like in our culture, oh, the heart is kind of the emotions, the seat of emotions. That it's different that in the Bible. It's got more of a cognitive aspect. Yeah, there's emotions involved, but there is something to that psychology.
Right.
Like, so if the fool has said in his heart there is no God, it's he might have, like, I found that when I meet somebody that doesn't believe in God, and it would be a lot harder back then when the Psalms are written, because it was
Hmm.
they're not dealing with modernism and secularism, that it was different. So it would be even more foolish. But when I meet someone who doesn't believe in God, sometimes I like to find out, well, who's the God that you don't believe in? What
Hmm.
do you think about him? Why don't you want to believe in him?
Right.
Instead of getting into, okay, let's debate creation evolution, which I love debating, I found that ended up being a dead end, because I would go through and show them, like, evolution isn't that solid, it didn't matter. Then I would take some other debate that they had, like theodicy, and show them that there is an answer for that, and find out it didn't matter. And then I started realizing there something happened to them,
Hmm.
or they were told something, and that painted a picture of God that was wretched, and that they don't want that, whether it was abuse, or bad experience with the religion, or a doctrine that just painted God in a horrific manner. There's a psychology to it. So the way we think about things does affect our theology completely.
Interesting. So I'd like to kind of go down that vein. I actually think works perfectly where we want to go, because um, I'd like to learn like what brought you into becoming. So you're a PhD student now, and you just got your master's degree. Before that, you got your bachelor's, and before that, you were doing other things in life. But maybe let's like zoom way back into like your days before you were a Christian, and maybe you can tell us a little of that that tension between psychology and theology, and that what you were an atheist, right?
So before that, I was raised Christian, raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was super faithful, super loving, super Christian. Like, taught me to go straight to God for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Taught me, you know, tons of stuff about God. I had my mom's side of the family taught me the Bible. I would go to church. My grandmother, my aunt was my godmother, taught me these things. But when my mom got into this horrific car accident, left her traumatic brain injury,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in a coma, and then she came out and she was different, like, because of the brain damage, it made her so different. I just thought, if God's going to do this to my mom, who was like one of the most Christian people I've ever met, and I still believe that she's still one of the most Christian people. I came back to the faith first, but man, she's a Christian through and through. And
Mm-hmm.
if God's going to do that to her, and so I had these like doubts and questions and a lot of theodicy. God's so good. Why is this happening to my mom? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad people get away with stuff? Because there's some possible corruption that happened with the car accident, with the contractor having his truck in the way, and then it disappeared, and then they denied everything. So there was a lot of like issues that I was sorting through, and
Mm-hmm.
then um, a lot of my friends were doubting. That didn't help. And then feeling that with all the science and all that stuff. But a lot of it was, I started picturing as God, and I was raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is like, Calvin College is there. It's like a bastion for Reformed theology, which a
Mm-hmm.
lot of predestination. And they were kind of like, that's just the way you are. Sorry. You're going to go, you're predestined to hell, was kind of like their attitude.
So like for people that don't know, what is like a quick way to explain what is predestination?
So predestination is kind of, there's two kinds.
Mm-hmm.
There's single predestination, which is God just, everyone's lost, and then from eternity, God just arbitrarily picks some people that are going to be saved.
Okay.
Double predestination is God picks the people who are going to be saved, and then he picks the people who are going to be lost.
Okay.
And it's Calvin logically pinned himself into that position. Luther held to that position somewhat. Lutherans they're single predestination. Calvin kind of delved into double predestination, but it was the second generation of Calvinists who really took it and made it part of their system and blew it up. And that's like half of evangelicals, maybe more than half, are that strain. A lot of Christians have that, and all of this, and I'm just like, man, if I'm going to hell, I might as well live it up here. And so I threw him out and threw out religion and became an atheist. And it was kind of this weird cross between like the intellectual atheist, really studying these things out, and then kind of like the hedonistic, like I didn't want God to exist because he's going to ruin my fun. That kind of crept into, and got involved in drug abuse, and it was weird getting great grades but smoking pot all the time and worse, and led to an overdose of LSD in Mardi Gras in New Orleans. In fact, it was 20 years ago this past Mardi Gras.
Oh, wow.
It was the anniversary 20 years ago, 2000, the Mardi Gras. I fried my brain and ended up in the hospital. And right before that, I started kind of switching from atheist to agnostic because I was intellectually honest enough that in an argument, I would sometimes take the minority opinion, which I still do, just to figure something out. So when I'm around a bunch of atheist friends and there's this one believer and they're all picking on him, I'll listen to what the guy says, and I think he's arguing terrible, and I will pick up his case. And then my friends couldn't answer me. So then I was kind of like, maybe there's something out there. The experience with the LSD was very spiritual, led me seeking, and I ended up going to this Catholic cathedral and sitting in the back and just, okay, God, if you're real, show me the way. And before I knew it, like a month later, I'm an Adventist because some people came and knocked on my door, invited me to a meeting that was halfway over. And then I listened to, it was kind of funny. They had cassette tapes they gave me, and cassette tapes were old in 2000. So I was like, what's wrong with these people? Why are they 10 years behind? And I still think that. It's like cassette tapes. I was like, that's like so 1990, and it was 2000. So but I had to dig out a Walkman, listen to like half the meeting on cassette tape in 2 days. So like 14 meetings that were like hour long. And so like 14 hours of sermon in 2 days to catch up.
That's basically like 2 full days of work, like an 8-hour workday. So you were just taking like 1 hour less and just.
And I was working full time. So I was working 8 hours, listening to that 8 hours.
And who, though it's interesting.
And then sleeping 8 hours.
Who were you listening to? Who was doing the series?
It was David Asher. I don't know, like his third or fourth meeting, like ever.
He was a baby, like evangelist at the time.
Yeah. So it was just great. It was the perfect timing. Everything was perfect. The Bible worker that worked with me is perfect. Like it was just all lined up just perfectly. And then I, joined the church, stayed around the local church for a bit, then went to a Bible college called Mission College of Evangelism in South Dakota. It was in South Dakota at the time. Got trained, traveled for 7 years all over Europe and United States, giving Bible work, doing Bible work, giving Bible studies, this kinds of thing, and developed this very anti-education, because some of it, this anti-education, I would go and talk to people who were in seminary or who were pastors, and they didn't know their Bible very well. So I was like, what good is it? I don't want to go there. What's the point? Never realizing that like there was people from Mission College that didn't know their Bible very well either. So you can't blame all the schools. It's just certain people are academically inclined and certain people are practically inclined and certain people are inclined for other things. And that's why there's different gifts. But, you get a little self-righteous and judgmental. And so I was anti-education. And then I decided to go to Central Cal and they were kind of open to like letting the Bible worker become a pastor without education. Tried that route, and it didn't happen. Some of it was the economy crashed.
Mhm.
Um, and my brother ended up going back home because my dad had some health issues. He decided, well, I'm sitting at home. He went to community college for a year, and then he went to Andrews, and I went to visit him, and he was having a blast. I talked to like a professor of church history, and I was like, oh man, that's like fascinating stuff. I should go. And I just signed up randomly. And
Mhm.
that's about the same time that you went to Walla Walla.
Right.
Like a whole bunch of us all went back to school all at the same
Right.
time. And then, so I went back, and I kind of was like an attitude for maybe about like half a semester. I'm just going to quick get this piece of paper and be done with it.
Mhm.
And by halfway through the semester, I'm like I became the Greek tutor, became the grader for the New Testament professor, and I was really good at it. And I was like, man, this is great. And so I
So
just really sunk my teeth into the bachelor's degree.
yeah.
Then became a pastor for 4 years. The whole time I was like, man, I want to go back to my MDiv. I want to get my MDiv. And they weren't sending people back to the MDiv. And then just randomly, my wife, who got a bachelor's in like health, and it was going to be PT, and it wasn't fitting. She didn't know what to do next. And randomly she decided to apply for the social work program. At the same time, they were going to move me, but they had nothing near Andrews. So they said, we don't want to separate you guys. We'll send you to the MDiv. And then it's just been me like happy like a pig in slop ever since. You know,
A pig in
all
slop.
these people, there's all these people like hate MDiv. They can't wait to get out of there. You know, I'm used to Michigan weather, so it's okay. Yeah, there's
Sure.
better weather out there except for in the fall. Fall
Right.
in Michigan's that September to like November period in Michigan is it's great. There's probably nothing better, but it's only like 3 months. Yeah, it's either too hot and too much mosquitoes in the summer, or um, too cold in the winter. But that 3 month period in the fall is great.
That's funny. I couldn't handle the weather out there. It was abysmal. It
Oh
was,
come on,
it
you
was
got to admit October's great.
okay.
Sweater weather.
Summers and the beach there in St. Joseph, like those are unprecedented. But
Yeah, the beach is great. The Silver Beach in Warren Dunes, that's great.
yeah,
But,
so we
but
didn't.
no, the winter's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, horrible, just absolutely terrible. Um, we didn't really talk about this, but um, I just kind of feel like this would be interesting to chat about for a moment, as you've kind of shared your journey. Like you were atheist, you really thought your way into Christianity, and sometimes I guess on the street there's this idea of education doesn't matter, or um, we don't need to really be thoughtful about our spirituality. We just, like, on one side it's like all I need is my Bible and my Bible only, which kind of comes from that Luther, sola scriptura, which needs to be understood in its context. And then there's another angle that's like, we just need to experience God, do praise services all the time, and as long as I'm experiencing God, that's all that matters. But um, I I'm just curious some of your thoughts in the sense of, like, how has studying impacted your spiritual life? Like
So,
looking for depth rather than just like, all I care about is just knowing the surface cliche traditions, the things that we say in the church, as long as I can glean over the top kind of. And because I've noticed this, just growing up in the church and whatnot, it's so easy to, um, it's so easy to just, you know, to have all these cliches and platitudes and then like regurgitate them nonstop in like discussion and whatnot. And like, what if those aren't always the answers, and maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper?
so I I studied world religions, and they were talking about Hinduism having like these four paths. I
Mm,
don't remember all four paths because I'm not a Hindu, but
right.
it kind of struck me like the one truth I had out of it was that I think not that there's multiple paths to God,
Mm-hmm.
but there's multiple ways to connect with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think intellectual is one, and that was one of the paths. Like there's people who really get into studying the philosophy of Hinduism, and they feel that's going to connect them with whatever deity they're serving. And I remember reading that, and I felt like that's me. And there's been great thinkers throughout Christian history,
Mm-hmm.
including Adventist history,
Mm-hmm.
like J. and Andrews, like learning all these languages and reading the Bible in multiple languages, super thoughtful, figured out the right time of the Sabbath when Joseph Bates and Ellen White were wrong for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
rejected his study, and God had to say, Ellen, you're wrong here.
Yeah.
You know, Andrews is right. So we've had guys who were thinkers. James White was a thinker.
Mm-hmm.
Uriah Smith was a thinker. Jones was a thinker. And these are guys, like when I read the Pioneers, those are the guys that fascinated me.
Mm-hmm.
So they were thinkers. But that's not to say everybody has to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can say the platitudes if those work for you, but they don't work for everybody. So if you're trying to improve your witnessing, you got to be able to be okay with other stuff. Like there's people who are more emotionally in tune to God, like, and they're big into prayer and worshiping with song. I mean, I went to a concert. I won't say who it was. He's like a famous pianist, hymn singer. I fell asleep. Just bored. Like it did nothing for me.
Right.
But other people around me loved it. It wasn't Fernando Ortega. I went to that was like one of the best ones I've ever been to. But I don't go to concerts, Christian music concerts.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they had come in, I'm like, yeah, my wife will want to go. It's like, yeah, you go ahead. It just bores me.
Right.
Some people connect that way.
Right.
So I learned, like, when I'm ministering to people, you got to pick out, like, what kind of person are they? There's people who are practical, you know, like the Marthas. Like, they got to be doing something. That's why, like, there's one guy said he hated church. And then one day they asked him to pick up the offering. And then it started beginning his deacon experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became this deacon. So, but having said that, I think it's super selfish to stay in your lane when that kind of stuff. And what I mean is, yeah, you connect with God that way, but how can you help someone else connect to God? And if you don't try thinking deeper, and you don't do, like I went and helped out at the food pantry this Sunday. It's not my cup of tea to do that practical kind of helping, but I did it and I felt good afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
When a really good song service is clicking, it does lift my heart up. And so I don't think thinking deep things about God is going to ruin your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about spirituality being a relationship and, you know, good best friends, doesn't have to be marriage, but you're married should be a best friend. You don't have to be married to experience this. When you're really clicking with a best friend, you're going to together talk about deep things about each other. Like you're going to go into, and not just like psychology, but like, why do you like this, and get into it deeply. Like what makes you tick? Like even this conversation that you're having with me, you're asking, like you're probing my mind deeply. You are getting to know me better.
Right.
Why should we not do that with God? And God is infinitely bigger than Nathaniel. So, you know, there's never ending. Like one of the beautiful things about heaven is that we're going to never arrive at the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I don't mean like we have truth, but like truth as God knows it, the perfection of truth is going to be a constant education for all of eternity. Like we'll never be bored. Like my greatest fear in life was being bored.
Yeah.
So I think I drive myself intellectually because of I don't like being bored. In fact, when I learned that, you know, the Bible teaches that hell is just burning you up and you don't exist, I was actually scared of that, because the scariest thing about being an atheist was lying in bed and thinking, contemplating non-existence made me break down and cry. When I was an atheist, it happened multiple times. I would contemplate non-existence and I wanted hell to burn forever because it freaked me out that non-existence would be true.
Wow.
Even to this day, there's this what if we're wrong and non-existence is true? And that scares me to death. And I'm just like, well, nobody will know because we'll all be dead and not existing. But it freaks me out because it's the most boring thing you could have because your brain will stop.
Right. And for you, a more brain dominant person, that would be, terrifying.
Yeah. That's why I thought Buddhism was cool until I found that Nirvana was basically nothingness. And I was like, oh man, that's just wretched. That would be terrible.
Well,
To
that's
be
why
kind of in this Nirvana state.
a lot of people don't want to go to heaven because they think if you're just sitting on a cloud twiddling on not a harmonica,
The harp.
a harp.
Yeah.
And then like it's basically you're not with anyone. You just have this vision of like being by yourself, doing nothing, thinking nothing, with no one. It's kind of like this coronavirus. You're all by yourself. Well, you can't be quarantined with anyone. You're all by yourself.
Yeah.
You're on your own cloud. It's anyways. And as I was saying all this, I have this verse I wanted to read. I've been thinking about it because I've been reading Proverbs a lot. It's Proverbs 25 verse 2. It says, "It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, to search out a matter is the glory of kings." So I just been thinking about this in the context of depth and to understand God, like we were talking about before, like it's necessary to have like conversation and understanding at all levels. It's just, you were telling me the other day, it's just not okay to stay at one level. It's important to continue to like, in our relationship with God, we can't just like stay at superficiality, although we need to understand the superficial things of God.
And listen, little what you call platitudes, little like promises or things you always say, they're comforting.
Yeah.
Like, you say little pet things to your I say pet things to my spouse. You have nicknames with your friends. They're comforting. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But if that's all you have, it's like, renting out a Airbnb mansion and only staying in the foyer. Yeah. Like, God has given you this mansion and you're just in the foyer. Like, go explore the mansion.
Wow.
And the yard and the garden and all of that. And you're stuck in the foyer? No wonder Christianity is pathetic to your children and to your friends. Because you just have a foyer, or front porch Christianity. There's so much there. And there's the intellectual component, there's the emotional component, there's a service component. I'd say like there's like the deep prayer component. There's all of this to the relationship and to devotional life and to thought. And so study to me is devotional. Like when I first came into Christianity, they told me about the concordance. That's the first book I bought besides my Bible. I bought a Bible and the concordance. And it started there. And then I was like, that was enough. I bought lexicons. And then I was, was introduced to other books, Great Controversy and Patriarchs and Prophets to help, and then learned about other books and more just building my library because they would just help me think and always draw me back with the Bible. Like even when I read something that I'm like, no, that the Bible doesn't say that, that's wrong. Where would I go to prove it wrong? The Bible.
Right.
So many people are like, just read your Bible. I had this pastor was we had these new pastor courses, and this guy comes in, we don't need books, we just have the Bible and Ellen White, and that will be our sermon. And I'll be like, your sermon is a commentary on the Bible. If I'm going to take you seriously, we shouldn't even listen to you. You should just get up and read whole passages for half an hour and never make a comment, because a book is just a sermon on written form. Whether it's deeper levels, and just like sermons, deeper levels and shallower levels. So this idea that we should have no other books but just the Bible, yes, is rule of faith, correct? But like then no preacher should preach.
True.
Because a preach is just, what's a preacher doing? It's just oral commentary on the Bible.
Right.
And that's what books are. And then you shouldn't even just study religion. You should study other things. Solomon, the wisest man in the world, was like talking about studying the ant. So you should study science, and you should study psychology and sociology and what makes people think, and all of this is beautiful.
I remember getting this idea when I was younger that people told me that, you can't leave, you can't go study, because if you go and study, God's not there. God's not at the university. God's not, like, you study too much, you're going to leave God. And I literally kind of went into undergrad, getting my bachelor's in theology, thinking like I might lose, God told me to go there first off. And then I went there and I was a little scared. And then I realized every class I took outside of theology, it was like science or philosophy or history, like all these classes that I had to take outside. It was weird. Every single class, it's like I felt like I was learning who God was through the lens of those disciplines as well. That God
Yes.
wasn't bound just to, like, the book or the church or a special little elite group that feel like they're the only ones that possess and contain God, but that God was, it's like, oh yeah, you think I'm not here? By the way, I'm there. And I'm there. And so I was just like mind blown over and over again. And then I started
Yeah,
studying those things deeper.
isn't it amazing? Like the group that was telling you God's not there
Hmm.
and afraid that you're going to lose their faith. It's just sad because, and I was there, like I thought those things.
Right.
It, it's your view of God is idolatry because you have just made God a territorial wimp.
Oh, that's
Like you
like,
have made him, you made it, he is not omnipotent.
right.
He's not omnipresent. He's
Right.
a figment of your imagination. He becomes a charm in your head to make you feel good. You are no different than the pagans of old in
Yeah.
that mentality.
Old Testament that got the Canaanite beliefs of religion, Mesopotamian ideas of the deities were that they were regional and that they only lived in certain areas. Like, oh, let's go attack them in the valley because we attacked them in the hills, and that's why they won, is because that's the area of their god. So literally,
And that story's in the Bible
yeah,
where
it's all
God kind of mocks the whole idea.
right.
And then we have that practically. Oh, God can't be with you when you go there. Now, listen, if you have certain addictions, certain problems, there's things you shouldn't go do. But
Right.
it's not that God's not there. It's just that you're just too stupid to handle certain things. Not college is not for everybody, nor is it that I couldn't have, if I would have went right away, I'm glad I went and Bible worked. I'm glad I did the journey I did.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been too immature and I would have been like, whatever the professor says I believe, that's immature too.
Right.
Like you have to be someone who thinks, but it could be your pastor, it could be your professor, it could be your Bible college teacher. No one should be a guru for you.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem sometimes I think with academia is that the young people that are teenagers and early 20s, they're not prepared. Like they're told what to do, where to go, when to go to bed. They can't even think for themselves. And then you ship them off to college and give them all this responsibility. And then they find some charismatic professor who they like, and it becomes their guru. And like, listen, professors are going to be wrong. They're human.
Right. Right.
Like that's just, I'm studying to possibly be one. And my greatest fear is that I will teach something wrong. And
You probably will.
yeah, and I probably will. And so
Yeah.
the reason why I want that to be a fear is because I don't want to be I don't want to be a guru. I want to be checked and I want to be studied out. And I don't want to be right. I want truth. I don't
Yeah.
want to win an argument
Right.
if I'm wrong.
Right.
I want to be humble enough to be like, you know that's not right. And I don't care who it's from. The problem is we do, and then it gets, that's a whole nother problem.
Right.
But
Totally. So we're gonna switch gears for a minute here as we're kind of bringing this to a close, and so we're actually going to interview Nate on here again, and since and I want to continue to interview some people, like some different people that I've met along the way that I feel like have some significant things to talk about that can be a blessing to us on the street. Kind of trying to connect the academy or the university to the street, because there's a need of that. and seeking, like, we don't all have to be theologians, but at least we can take some ideas and think about them, and it can improve our spiritual walk, I think. So there's some areas we were talking about before that you are interested in and you're pursuing. Can you tell us a little bit about those, and maybe we can let the audience decide what they're interested in hearing next time, and we can dive into
Yeah.
that and maybe see how it correlates to scripture and whatnot.
So I have three current academic interests that are very that I'm passionate about studying.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of mentioned the one was this idea of presuppositions.
Mm-hmm.
You could call them worldviews. Social imaginary is kind of a new academic hip term. So if you guys learn that one, you'll be like way ahead of the curve, which is not normal
Social
for Adventists.
imaginaries.
Yeah, social imaginary, it's better than worldview. But this is kind of like the stuff that kind of shades and flavors your study.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we should just read the Bible simply. But the problem is that the human agent blinds itself because it's carnal. In fact, the Bible says that we're so carnal, we don't even know it, and so deceitful. And part of that is just our limited perspective. We bring baggage into the text. And like I pointed out before, the way your dad treated you, whatever, that kind of flavors the text. So you can't just study the Bible. There's got to be this work, personal work. Like, why do I react that way when someone teaches that way? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I so allergic to that teaching?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I think that, like, I'm not allergic to hell burning forever, even though I think God makes God sound terrible, because I'm actually more afraid of non-existence, but I see it correctly teaching. But I find people, if hell doesn't burn forever for them, they get angry and irate. And I'm like, why? And then you find out that they have forgiveness issues. And so you start unlayering these things. So a lot like studying your presuppositions, the baggage you bring to the text,
mm-hmm.
and figuring how to get rid of that. That's a big passion of mine.
Okay. So
Second passion.
the first one, how would you explain it in one sentence? Like that's a lot.
Your personal biases that you bring towards the text and how to overcome them.
Okay.
You can't overcome them completely, but how to try to mitigate or lessen their effect.
Okay. And the second one?
The second one is emotions, biblical emotions, like in what the Bible says about them, specifically and the anthropology on the human end,
mm-hmm.
Which I believe leads to God. How does God have emotions? That's secondary, but primarily, like, what are they? What should we do with them? There was this kind of time when I was in my surroundings with Adventism, emotions were bad and thinking was good, and that really appealed to me. But there's this interesting thought that character is thoughts and feelings. And
right.
When we're supposed to be building character, then we should be building thoughts and feelings. So right. What are feelings? How do we build them? Mm-hmm. And what are they? What do we do with them? Is anger always bad? Is joy always good? I mean, I got joy out of watching the first 15 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, watching soldiers die while sitting next to a World War II vet. That joy was inappropriate and wrong. Mm-hmm. If you see someone getting raped or a loved one gets raped, is being angry wrong at that injustice? Right. Dealing with that kind of stuff. So I think there's times to be angry, and there's times you should not be happy, and trying to sort that out and figure out what are they. That's second interest.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah, I think that's clear. It was the first one was very
first one super philosophical and technical. Right. No one probably. It's very interesting, super helpful.
I think it's fascinating. I think both of them are.
So the third one, it's I'm not. It's kind of like a hobby. Those are the two I really like interest in studying, but this is still studying, is finding cultural connection points. Mm-hmm. And specifically in media, which a lot of times Adventist is very allergic to. Movies are bad, books are bad, novels are bad, and all of that. But the fact is everyone did it. And like, it's interesting because Paul knew the philosophers. They did that as a hobby. He knew what they taught. And then he connected with them. So kind of like this Mars Hill connection.
Right.
finding things that you can connect with. And so like things like, okay, Star Wars is Buddhism. It's not Christian. It's
Mhm.
not, I don't think you should watch Star Wars and get theology from it. But
Right.
what's interesting is that in Buddhism, the idea is this balancing of the yin and yang. And
Mhm.
the whole Lucas is always preaching in his movies, the balancing of the force, the balancing of the force. And then you come, and I'm talking about the original 3 movies. You come to the end, and there's no balancing of the force. It's the good wins. That's a great controversy. Lucas couldn't help himself but contradict Buddhism theology and put the great controversy in there. And so I don't think you should go watch those movies, but you can read the plots, you can understand that, and you meet someone, especially if you live in Portland, Oregon, where they're like all into like the hip and cool stuff, and you start breaking down a theological point using examples from media. That's like Jesus using the rich man and Lazarus, which was completely full of theological problems which still plague us to this day, but he was using a popular story to teach a truth.
Right.
And so
Like it.
using the popular culture and finding connection points is kind of a habit of me. But you got to critique it. Like I just said, Star Wars is full of garbage theology, but it's interesting that God wouldn't let Lucas go that far.
Mhm.
I like maybe Lucas is thinking about that. I don't know what happened, but he threw out his theology, like,
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the 3rd movie.
Interesting. Okay. So,
So stuff like that, like whether it's books or movies or music or
mm,
finding these cultural connection points with
nice.
theology to use as points of contact. It's kind of they call it natural theology,
Mhm.
finding points of contact without the Bible. Obviously, you're informed by the Bible, but you're trying to make this contact with people.
Okay.
Um,
So, voting number 1, social imaginaries, right? The
which is the biases and the baggage you bring.
biases
Yes.
in the baggage. Number 2, how to deal with feelings from the lens of scripture. What are they? And diving in a little bit deeper into that, like they aren't just all evil, and we're not just thinking beings, we're also
Yeah,
feeling.
we're not Star Trek, the Klingon, not Klingon, Vulcan, the guys that had no emotions. We're humans. The emotions part of us.
Right, right.
There's like this message that we should become Vulcan and get rid of all emotions.
That's
It's
like
really funny. A lot of people that are
glorification.
teaching, they teach that way, and then they always have anger problems.
Right, right. And then
So they're, yeah. Anyways, we
yeah,
can get into that if people want that.
right. And then the last one you just explained. How would you summarize that one?
The last one, points of connection.
Hmm.
Finding points of connection with the culture around you. When you read Paul, he does it all the time. He
Hmm.
changed the way he did work in Corinth versus Athens. He was trying to find points of connection. You can see it in the Old Testament with Abraham, the way you see it with God. Totally comes down to people's culture, lowers his thinking and his ability, and clothes his purity in sinful flesh.
Right. He
You
explains
know,
who he is in the context of human language, of some of even
as
the Middle
as
East.
imperfect as it could be.
Right.
You know, even Peter pointed it out. Paul just doesn't make any sense. And then Peter has words that don't make any sense. So it's the same thing. You're just trying to find theology points. And one of the technical terms would be cultural exegesis. Exegesis is the process of
Okay.
bringing out of the text the truth. Cultural exegesis is looking at the culture around you and is there truths there?
Hmm.
And there are,
Right.
in all the cultures, and critiquing where it's wrong,
Right.
because the culture isn't perfect like the Bible. The Bible, you use it to find what's good in the culture and critique what's bad,
Mm.
and use the good as points of connection so that then you can correct and prophetically preach to what's bad in culture.
Nice. Okay. I love it. So our time's pretty much up, but
Yeah,
I'm
so
excited.
vote social imaginary, emotions, or cultural connections. Pick
All
one of
right.
those and vote.
Love it. Thanks for taking the time, Nate. And then we'll connect again this next week
Yeah.
and dive deep into this one. And I'm excited
And
to.
hi to everyone who knows me in your churches, because I know some of them.
That's true. That's true. If
Like
you,
quite a few of them. Bible worked in McMinnville, so
yeah, absolutely.
and been lived in that area for 3 years, so
3 years.
2.5 years. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. Well,
So,
thanks for joining us, Nate, and we'll see you next week.
all right, sounds good.
Peace.